In 3 weeks of January 2025, the Russian army occupied 233 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. At the same time, the Russian army's losses in personnel are 34,520. In other words, there are on average 148 occupiers per 1 square kilometer of Ukrainian land, essentially 1.5 companies. Ukrainian military expert Oleksandr Kovalenko said this. According to him, it is worth noting that the average indicator of the proportion of the Russian army advance in 2024 was 129 bodies per 1 square kilometer. In turn, in comparison with the second half of 2024, there is a slight slowdown in the advance of the occupiers, with a constant increase in losses of personnel. I think this trend of increasing the proportion of losses will continue, and soon 200 bodies per 1 kilometer squared will no longer surprise anyone. We can already talk about the inevitability of setting an absolute record for losses in the category of motor vehicles at the Russian army in January 2025. Moreover, this will not only be the first record of Russian army losses this year, but also an absolute one for the entire period of a full-scale war. Let me remind you that such indicators were the result of the depletion of the BBM component in the Russian army. The war in Ukraine revealed a wide range of shortcomings of Soviet/Russian BBMs, such as BMP-1-2-3, BMD-1/2/3/4, BTR, etc., which were previously known, but which were hushed up and not corrected for decades, he added. Oleksandr Kovalenko said that the very slow survivability of Soviet/Russian armored fighting vehicles, which was given over to completely ineffective properties such as buoyancy and the ability to be dropped from aircraft, led to catastrophic losses of this component. Today, the Russian Army Command and the Russian military-industrial complex cannot solve this problem. Russia does not have a modern armored fighting vehicle with good survivability indicators, with the exception of the BMOT, but these are unique, single examples. Therefore, the Russian Army Command took the simplest and most primitive path. The category of armored fighting vehicles began to be massively replaced by ordinary civilian transport, which led to an increase in not only the losses of the corresponding equipment but also personnel, because the survivability of the landing force did not increase from this, but just the opposite, he told. In January 2024, the Russian army lost 934 vehicles. In January 2025, I think it will be more than 2,900, if not more than 3,000. Back in 2009, Leonid Orlenko warned that the equipment the Russian army is equipped with is not capable of performing combined arms offensive missions. Almost all MBT and AFV models are outdated and do not meet either the challenges on the battlefield or the requirements of the regulations. How good that back then everyone looked at Orlenko as a crazy old man, especially one who dared to encroach on an untouchable sacred thing, the T-90, which has no analogues in the world.
Hamas militants on Saturday released 4 female Israeli soldiers they held captive for 15 months to the Red Cross in a planned exchange for 200 Palestinian prisoners or detainees in Israel. According to Associated Press, it's the second exchange since a fragile ceasefire took effect last weekend, halting the fighting in Gaza for at least 6 weeks, during which dozens of Israeli hostages and hundreds of Palestinian prisoners will be freed while more aid flows in. In return for the 4 soldiers, Israel should free 200 Palestinian prisoners or detainees, including 120 militants serving life sentences after being convicted of deadly attacks. The first exchange took place Sunday with the release of 3 Israeli hostages and 90 Palestinian prisoners. Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza has killed more than 47,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health authorities. The ministry doesn't distinguish between combatants and civilians. The war was sparked by Hamas' October 7, 2023, attack on Israel, which killed around 1,200 people.
غزة.
وانا عندي تيمي وسلمته بالبيانات تمام، او باركود ومش عارف شو الحاجات هذه. بدك تنزل؟ ما ينفعش انا كل واحد عاملين وكيل الله مكيفين. هذول عساكر؟